Welcome back to another Rest, Eat, Move podcast. This is Matt solo in the studio. I hope you enjoyed the last podcast on sleep. I really thought the podcast before that on the dopamine dependence was really interesting. So if you haven't checked those out, check those out. We are in between a duo podcast, so my father will be back next week. Hope everyone had a nice weekend. Again, I want to thank everyone who has served. That's why we get to enjoy the Memorial Day weekend. But today I wanted to talk about something that I continue to get asked. It's common. It's in social media. It's in the papers. It's in journals. I think it's in people's belief systems. Some supplements that continue to be kind of like the staple, the holy grail of common supplements. Vitamin D, melatonin, magnesium, calcium. And I remember when I was first having children, they would tell you that you need to get your kids to have more calcium and you need to get your kids to have more vitamin D. And the solution was usually either take a vitamin D supplement or consume more dairy. And I think we've been told this for many, many years, and I try to look up why it started. Not really sure, so I'm not going to go deep into that. But when you Google calcium absorption and how to get more calcium in the body, for the first time in a while, I don't know if this has changed recently or maybe I just noticed it, you're starting to see that calcium is being talked about as not a good absorption level with dairy. Now, forever, most people thought you get your calcium from dairy, when in reality, we know calcium comes from greens, and so that the dairy need to eat the greens or the grass. But now as you Google, you're starting to see more and more information that calcium is not the best to get from dairy. And so that's something new. It's good to see because that's something I try to convince people on all the time. But let's talk about this. I'm going to kind of title this as the chain of life, because all of these things are connected. And when we isolate them, when we talk about supplementation, when we start to get so fixated on a specific number, we forget about the chain of effects. And it's kind of like that butterfly effect. You do this, it will lead down the path or downstream to something else. And so let's talk about the chain of life. Vitamin D is probably one of the most common talked about supplements that people need to consume. Vitamin D levels are extremely low across our country. Vitamin D does so many different things. It's a fat-soluble, more like a hormone, but it's a vitamin. And it really is responsible for cellular function. It's responsible for calcium absorption. And you'll see in a second, this is a big deal. But low vitamin D usually leads to higher levels of cholesterol. And so why does that matter? And just because you have high levels of cholesterol doesn't mean that that's bad, but why would lower levels of vitamin D possibly lead to higher levels of cholesterol? Well, it comes back to this chain of life. Here's how this works. Cholesterol is one of the most essential molecules the body produces. It's the backbone to all of your hormones. It's called the steroidal hormonal pathway. And so think about your growth hormone needs cholesterol to produce it. And inside that equation, cholesterol in your skin helps to absorb vitamin D3 from the sun. So back to my question. Why would low vitamin D lead to high levels of cholesterol? I'm not the expert in this space, but common sense would tell me because we need to increase vitamin D. And if vitamin D is low, what the body knows to do is to produce more cholesterol, specifically in the skin cells, so that you can absorb more vitamin D. It's a beautiful chain. So cholesterol leads to hormones, cholesterol helps to absorb vitamin D, and then we keep going down this path. Did you know that to absorb calcium, you need vitamin D in your gut? You also need magnesium. And you also need phosphate or phosphorus. Without these, calcium by itself cannot be absorbed. Again, back to this chain of life. Cholesterol's out of balance, poor hormones, Vitamin D can't be absorbed like it wants to be, and calcium can't be absorbed. This is a very simple, simplistic form to show you this chain of life. Think about this stat. We have the highest intake of calcium in the world, the United States. The United States has the highest intake of calcium in the world, yet the United States has the poorest quality of bone health in the world. So more calcium does not create healthier bones. Why is that? Because there's more to the equation than just what we have been told that we need this nutrient or this supplement called calcium. When you look up this stuff, when you start to see this, here's the 4 supplements that I highly recommend getting from a natural source or creating more harmony in the body to produce it naturally. Vitamin D. I don't recommend taking a vitamin D supplement. You can get this nutrient from getting it through the sun and through something like cod liver oil that has it naturally. Now back to a fat-soluble vitamin. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, so you need that fat in the body. Hence, the cod liver oil is a great vehicle for it. It's naturally occurring, and that's a fat. It's much more absorbable. We get so fixated how many milligrams, how many IUs. It all comes down to absorbability. The second supplement I don't recommend is magnesium. Very inefficient to absorb magnesium through a oral supplement. You can get magnesium through food, and you can get magnesium through these things called Epsom salts, which if you listen to the sleep podcast, we talked about the importance of magnesium with sleep. And it's becoming very common to hear this. I still don't think people know it like they should. You never should take a calcium supplement. It's so hard to absorb. It creates other problems in the body when it's just floating around. Kidney stones, atherosclerosis, different things, hardening of the arteries. We need that calcium to be absorbed. If it's not absorbed, it's going to turn into some other, either a toxin or it's going to cause some disturbances. Remember, for calcium to be absorbed, you need vitamin D, magnesium, and phosphorus. And if you don't have those, if it's not part of the regimen, that's what makes that, in my opinion, not a supplement I would consume. And the last one is melatonin. Melatonin is produced when we start to get the circadian rhythm under control. When we see daylight, we start to produce more melatonin when it starts to become darker. And if we're not getting outside enough, we're not getting enough sunlight, we're not going to be producing this melatonin. I see a lot of people relying on melatonin to fall asleep. They're expecting it to help them to stay asleep, which it doesn't. It just helps you fall asleep. But these are the 4 supplements that are part of this chain of life that if you start to hack and manipulate, we start to see some other issues because we're not going after the source of the problem. A great example of this is why would low vitamin D lead to higher cholesterol? Because remember, if you've ever listened to our podcast on cholesterol, whatever your cholesterol is what your body needs it to be. It doesn't mean that you have high risk or low risk. Your body is trying to adapt. And so the bigger question is, how do we get our body to have less inflammation, to have less risk, have less oxidation? That's a more important question than how do we lower cholesterol. Again, we're going to come and continue to bring you tidbits of information. We'll have these dialogues. I thought this was really interesting because 4 of the things we talked about are some of the most common supplements in the world. And in my opinion, I don't see the need for these supplements if we ask better questions, if we understand that you need to bring more to the party, and the body naturally can do this if you go to the source of the problem. Have a great day. We'll see you again next time.